Hello everyone! In this video I'm going to show you how to create this Monet inspired watercolor painting. As you can see, you will have some water lilies, some lily pads, and some ripples of water. We're using two different techniques, wax resist and salt. Then at the end we will also spatter it with a little bit of diluted white tempera paint. Let's look at the supplies that we will need. First of all, you will need watercolor. I'm using liquid watercolor. So in each of these little salsa containers, I've put 2 tablespoons of water and 1 teaspoon of liquid watercolor and then stirred it up. That is really good for any students grade K through 4 especially. It's easier for them to use, but you can use it with higher grades also. If you don't have that, you can use the traditional watercolor sets like this one. These are especially recommended for grades 4, 5, and 6. They can be challenging for younger students to use. The other thing that you'll need is either oil pastels like these or crayons like these. Either will work. Of course, you're going to need paintbrushes. You will need a container of water. There are paper towels. I have diluted white tempera paint and salt. Salt creates an interesting reaction when it is sprinkled on wet watercolor, which you will see in a bit. And of course, you also need watercolor paper. This is 12 by 18 watercolor paper that is 140 pounds, which is a nice school grade watercolor. And you will also have these handouts to help you out. There is the learning objectives, how to draw a water lily, and the Monet water lily painting drawing guide. So let's get started. First of all, you should use either your crayons or your oil pastels and choose a color that you would like. I haven't used purple before, so I'm going to use that this time. So my first water lily, I'm going to draw it down towards the bottom. So that's going to be the water lily that's closest to me. It's going to be the biggest water lily. So it can be on either the left side or I suppose the middle too. I think I'm going to choose to go ahead and put it over here on the left side. And I want it to be at least as big as the palm of my hand. Now you can use the water lily drawing guide. So I'm just going to draw a wide U shape. And then I'm going to add some curved lines to make the front petals. So something kind of like this. And then I'll add more curved lines to make the back petals. There we go. Next, I will draw some jagged lines to be the stamens. And I'm going to switch to a different color here. And you can draw stamens all sorts of different ways. This is how I'm going to choose to draw mine. Now what I'm going to do is use a white oil pastel, and I'm going to go over these lines and color the inside of the water lily. And you'll notice that as I do that, it smudges the purple and kind of adds a little bit of tint, a little bit of color to the inside of the lily. So it's a nice blending technique, and it will also resist the watercolor when we get to that point and we add it on, so it makes it a little bit easier to paint it. So any watercolor that accidentally touches or goes over the water lily, it's okay, it won't affect it because the wax in the oil pastel or the crayon will resist it. Okay, there we go, nice and blended. And if you want to, you could go back in and add a little bit more color in some places, but that's not necessary. But you can do it if you want to. And now I'm going to blend that with my oil pastel a little bit. And I have some very pretty results. So I am going to go ahead and take another color and kind of color in my stamens here. Okay, so I am going to repeat that and add more water lilies scattered across my paper. And the water lilies that are in the front are going to be large, and as they go towards the back, they're going to get smaller and smaller. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, now I have finished blending all of my watercolor lilies. So the colored outline, and then I used the white oil pastel and went over that and blended it all together, and I made sure to add stamens. I used 2 different colors of yellow. Now the next thing that I'm going to do is add some lily pads. So I'm going to use this color here, and lily pads are basically flattened ovals. Not every lily necessarily has to have a pad, but you can if you want. You'll notice that this flattened oval has a little V shape on the side. And then I'm also going to add a few extra lily pads here and there that are just kind of floating on the water. And I'm going to use another color, green, and I'm going to just go through and add a few different accent lines just to make it look nice. Alright, the next step is to add some ripples of water. So I'm going to choose a few different blues and maybe a lavender. And I am just going to start adding some water lines. So it looks like the water is maybe flowing gently throughout the artwork. And I'll do that in a couple of different colors. And you won't be able to see this, but I'm also going to add some white. And sometimes maybe I'll just go over the same lines, and then sometimes I'll just put white right next to it. Okay, so now that that is done, it is time to start adding the watercolor. So I am going to choose maybe a nice large brush like this one, and I will just dip it into one of my colors and kind of stir it up a little bit, and I will start doing nice long brush strokes so it looks like it adds to the effect of the water. And I can change colors, so I will just dip into a different color blue and kind of blend those together. And these nice long horizontal brush strokes are linear like the water is. And you can see right here where I had just white and you couldn't see the white pastel until I went over it with the watercolor, and now you can see that it masked the paper and resisted it, so I have this kind of white shimmery area. And as I said earlier, you don't have to be that careful about avoiding the lilies because they have been masked off with the oil pastel, so they will also resist. All right, now I'm going to clean out my brush a little bit by swooshing it into the water, and I'm going to add some purple. And I am going to avoid the water lilies because I want to paint those in green later, but I can let the blue and the purple mix together in some areas, and that's the nice thing about watercolor. It makes colors blend together when they're still wet and look really nice. So I'll get some nice areas of pure purple, and then I'll get some areas where the purple has mixed with the blue, and it creates a nice effect. Okay, looks good for now. Now I'm going to clean out my brush and work on the lily pads. So I'll mix up my green a little bit from my salsa container and start adding green to my lily pads. But to liven it up a little bit, I think I'm also going to add a little bit of yellow on top of that in some areas. So rinse out my brush, mix up my yellow, and dab that on there here and there. Oh, and I almost forgot, shoot, to add the salt. So I can see in this area my paint is still really wet. So I'm just going to sprinkle that on there, and we'll see what that looks like. And I can re-wet the paint. I'll re-wet this up here a little bit. With some plain water. And then I'll sprinkle some salt on that too. I finished painting the lily pads and let this dry. In the classroom, this would be the next day that you make art. So you can see that the salt dried and made a really beautiful pattern on the artwork. So the fun part now is to run your hands over the surface of the painting and kind of gently remove those little grains of salt. And this is a really fun activity that the students really like. Then you can kind of tap that all into the center of your painting and either tap it into the trash can. I'm going to tap it onto this handout and then put this handout or dump it from there into the trash. But I think that for me, this painting is finished. If I added white spatters on this, I think it would be a little bit of overkill. I think that the salt created that nice shiny water reflection effect that I wanted. But I wanted to show you on this painting that I did not use salt on. I want to show you how the spattering can enhance the painting. So I'm going to take some paper towels that I tore up into bits because I don't want my spatters to get all over my flowers necessarily. So I'm going to mask those off a bit, something kind of like that. Then I'm going to take my watered down tempera paint. So you, after you get enough experience, you'll know when it's just right. So you want it to be not so thick that it doesn't spatter, but not so thin that it kind of disappears on the paper. So let's try this. So I'm loading up the brush with lots of paint, and then I'll just use my finger and I'll just tap, 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 tap. And there is that finished painting. So you can see that the spattering effect is similar to the salt, and it's also a nice way to do it. So I think both techniques look very nice. So that is it for this project. I hope you have fun.